Michael Tait released a confession online.
Tate was very charming, didn't travel too many places in CCM where people didn't know exactly who he was. There was a lot of power. It is highly unlikely that the tour manager didn't know stuff.
The drinking, the cocaine, this wasn't what I thought it was.
When you have an ecosystem of secrecy, where does it stop?
The Michael Tate situation continues to expand its unique brand of wreckage on a lot of lives. A huge concern in my mind is the reaction to the Christian music industry writ large. The situation seems to have uncovered some weak spots and corruptions inside that entire culture. And I hate it for those of us who have enjoyed the product of Christian music. So in the interest of being helpful with how to navigate scandals and disappointments like this, I want to introduce everyone to an old friend of mine who has been inside the CCM world for a really long time, and he was good friends at one season of his life with Michael Tate himself many years ago. Now, his name is Jason Lee McKinney. He's a musician and a songwriter out of the Nashville scene, and he's also a professor, and he recently became a doctor of philosophy. So I thought it'd be helpful and interesting to have someone from the inside of that world coach us through some things. This is my interview with Jason. All right, welcome, Jason. I gave a few of your resume points there, and anything I left out that might be relevant or helpful to the subject matter, or just sharing how great you are in a general sense.
I guess it's relevant to the topic. I spent the beginning portion of my career in the CCM industry. I probably have not been super actively involved in that because I spent the last 15 years in the Americana realm. However, Nashville's a small town. I still know all those people. All the same people play and write songs for, the same people. So like a buddy of mine wrote a song for Johnny Lang, and he also wrote a lot of Cindy Morgan stuff. Kids, Cindy Morgan was a singer way back in the they're gonna have no idea who Cindy Morgan was, but and then my son Zeke is on Tooth and Nail Records, and so my son, who actually for those who go to One Life, who led with me, is a CCM artist. My son Zion is he's a worship pastor, and he writes worship music, and tangentially wrote a lot of songs with Travis Ryan, who wrote We Believe, which was a big hit for the Newsboys. So even though I'm not as central part of my career involved in CCM, it's still touching points.
Yeah, just walking throughout that now. And you teach music business, is that correct? Okay, so
that's correct. Yeah,
and so you really have some insider information on, how that goes. Now, walk me through. We've talked a little bit about your relationship with Michael Tate, and it's been a lot of years ago, but still kind of what that looked like. And we're not going to focus a whole lot on that, but what in ways that it would be relevant would be helpful.
Yeah, I would say that, we met at a festival in Missouri back in 2001, kind of became fast friends. This will be a shocker for those who are in the music industry. I went on before him. I was not quite as popular as him, but we did play the same bill. We got to be fast friends. I spent a lot of time with my family, spent a lot of time just hanging out on a social level. We did work together on some stuff, some songs and some projects that never really got finished or put out. It was about a 3-year window between 2001 and 2004. We hung out a whole lot. Honestly, we haven't been in the same room since 2004. Okay. There was no fallout. There was nothing big that happened, as far as it just sort of, as things happen, you're close with someone for a time, and then you're not. And so that, as far as the nature of our relationship, that's kind of what it was. It was semi-professional, semi-personal, but there was a window there where we were around each other. I would say I was in the inner circle of his life for a short time there.
Yeah, so it at least gets a read on how he would have been perceived by those around him, and what life would have looked like from everybody's vantage point. I remember asking you, what was it about him that made him who he was, and why, kind of the shock and the fallout, and how he came across. And I was intrigued by your answer.
Yeah, it's really interesting. There's kind of 3 parts to it, and I don't think it's too dissimilar to like Mark Driscoll, The Rise and Fall of Mars Hill kind of thing, is to have the descriptions of those type of people. Tate was very charming. People wanted to like him. I think there's a personality just a gregarious personality, everybody's friend. There's also the power dynamic of he didn't travel too many places in CCM where people didn't know exactly who he was.
Right.
There wasn't a lot of anonymity in his life. And so there was a lot of power. And then there was just a lot of what you would seem to think, would be a lot of care for people. And if there's a fourth one, he's an extremely talented guy. Like
Right.
you can't deny that fact. He can really sing. He's a great singer.
Who knew?
Even today, with everything that's happened, it's that whole separating, this person may be this, but they were also this, I mean, he is a great singer, period.
Yeah, and with the DC Talk thing, I mean, they did things that no one had ever done before, and they produced things that no one had. I was never the biggest CCM fan, but I remember when Jesus Freak came around, I was truly, honestly impressed with what they had pulled off. Comparing it to any secular stuff, it's very, very impressive piece of work. It just is, and there's no denying that. So that put him in that place. And we talked a little bit about, people. I think the average person sees that coming out, and they've seen pastors fall. That's kind of old habit, which is a terrible thing to say, but it's true. But then with the CCM thing, that there was a sense of, oh my goodness, what's the culture there like? You hear about the drinking, you hear about the cocaine, and this wasn't what I thought it was. And I guess there's different angles to look at that at, but you mentioned the power dynamic, and I've often wondered, and I've seen that with pastors, that there can be a tipping point where I really believe a lot of people start off as sincere as you or I or anybody else, but they just get in a culture and an environment, and they're handed money, influence, people at their beck and call, and it can do kind of a thing on your mind. And do you think there's anything like that at play?
Yeah, I definitely think, we also have to keep in mind that it's not too dissimilar from like athletes, like a young NBA player who goes from nothing to just a few short years later, you're a multimillionaire, and people don't tell you no. And as much as that seems like, oh, the freedom in that, there's also like, there's really no pure freedom is not really freedom, as we all know. Do anything you want. It really isn't freedom at all. We need borders and parameters just as human beings. And that's sort of gone. There's no one to tell you no. And you're a very young person when it starts.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, some of Tate's behavior and the accusations go throughout where he was a man who was more mature, but it's that power was gifted to him and Toby and Kevin when they were pretty young men.
They met in college, right?
26, they were huge, massive, as big as any. People forget, but DC Talk was as big as any Christian band has ever been. Yeah. That may seem weird. In fact, I teach students who have no idea that Toby Mac used to be in a band. They have no idea. They know who Toby Mac is. Like, he used to be in a band. Like, yeah, kind of a big one. But I guess that was 20 years ago now. So, so I think that power dynamic is definitely, it's not only that it's fact that it's handed to anybody, young or old, but when it's handed to somebody really young, it's almost always disastrous to one level or another.
Yeah, which is kind of scary all by itself, because we have that. And I've heard people say things like, oh, it's time just to burn the whole CCM world down, and start over or reform it, or because it's so corrupted to the core that, and all that sort of stuff. So, and I don't think you can avoid celebrity. Jesus in one sense was very much celebrity. The crowds followed him wherever he went. He even tried to hide, which is some of my favorite part of the Gospels. He's kind of running around there all, and he was a famous guy, and they had to get in a boat to get away from the crowds and all that. So, and that's been true throughout church history. You have people that just have a voice that is attractive to a whole lot of people. So that can't be it. But when it comes to, if I hear about all this stuff and I just think CCM itself ought to be burned down, and I'm sure you've heard comments like that or seen them written down, what's your spin on that? You're sitting on a lot of the middle of it. You see it kind of from an older vantage point now, and you're a professor guy, and what's your take on that, and how would you coach somebody that kind of wonders about that?
Yeah, I don't think burning it down is the solution.
Okay, it's a start.
These are guesstimate percentages, but I would say about 70% of the people that make CCM music are doing it truly with a pure heart. They're also sinners. Even the ones that want to do it with a pure heart, they're also sinners.
No.
And then there's probably 15% who just, and this is a guesstimate, like I said, but they grew up in Christian culture. They know what to say. They know how to play the game. And this is just all they've ever known. It's not even like they're using Christianity. It's just Christianity is all they've ever known. It's the culture they grew up in. They have no other way to voice their art. So, well, I was raised a Christian. I got signed to a record label when I was 20. I guess I'm a Christian artist. I guess this is what I'm doing. But it's not really a mission. It's just sort of where they find themselves because of their background, because of their culture.
Right.
And then there's 15% that are probably truly just using it for the money. They're using it to it's the door that opened to their fame and stardom, and that's the one they're going to keep walking through. Yeah. And so, but I don't think burning the whole thing to the ground is the answer any more than I think because some megachurch pastors fall that we start burning all of Christianity to the ground either. I don't think that's the solution either.
Good call.
I do think that there is almost by necessity a culture of secrecy in CCM because of different denominational theology. That there are CCM artists who I know personally who collect wine. And there are certain places in certain denominations in Christendom that if they found out they collected wine, I've never seen these people abuse wine. I've never seen them drink too much. I've never seen them really even drink hardly at all. They collect it because it's worth a lot of money. But there are certain places that if people knew that and found out, it would be anathema. They would be crucified. They would be not Christians. They would be all these things that it's really a second level non-Nicene Creed issue that because some people make it a major issue, the CCM industry bakes into its ecosystem that must be kept secret. But the problem I think that we're having a reckoning on in CCM is when you have an ecosystem that is built upon, well, we got to keep certain secrets because denomination A is really conservative on this and denomination B is not, down to there are artists I know who won't even voice their opinion on the ordination of women because you have to keep that secret, because if you say something, well, half of denominations are going to say that you're going to be relegated to
I wouldn't know anything about that at all.
What'd you say?
I said I wouldn't know anything about that at all.
So because of that, there's almost this necessitated secrecy.
Right.
The problem is when you have an ecosystem of secrecy, where does it stop? And if people are used to keeping secrets, how far does that go? And I think we're finding out it's obviously gone too far.
Yeah, exactly. Because I don't want anything that we say kind of be perceived as excuse making. It's more just like trying to decipher out and helping people discern. Because it's not hard for me to believe at all, because I've been in the church world my entire adult life, that they're kind of that same percentage. I've seen absolutely phenomenal people that go to megachurches and have been at megachurches where pastors fell, that they're some of the greatest Christian people you'd ever want to meet in your life. And then you have some that are a little I think they started okay, but they sort of just kind of went off the rails. And then you have the other ones you're kind of wondering, maybe it's all they ever knew, or they're just in it for it's a low-hanging fruit or something like that. So is there any way at all that you would coach someone to try to discern that? Just as because for instance, Larry Norman was my guy. Larry Norman was a guy, ladies and gentlemen, that he was even before me. But he was, I'd played in bands my whole life, and I didn't like Christian music much at all, but he seemed like the most talented and authentic in my world, the stuff that I enjoyed. I still think he's fantastic. But man, after he passed away, there was exposés and all that, and it really did bother me. Wow, I felt duped. I felt stupid. I felt a lot of things. Mm-hmm. But was there anything I could have done to help size any of that up or discern it or not get too surprised, or I just need to be generically cynical?
Well, I always naturally err towards the side of cynicism, but I don't think that's a good thing. That's
not the coaching, everybody. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that's not I wouldn't advise that. I think a couple things that I would look for just in hindsight is number one, just have the grace to know that people are people and they're sinners and they're going to have stuff in their life that if you found out, you wouldn't like it.
Right.
You wouldn't like it. You would say, well, that's sinful. Well, of course. And I love Rich Mullins said, when people say Christians are hypocrites, it's exactly what we admit when we walk through the door.
Yeah.
It's what Christianity is about, going, there's a standard and I'm raising my hand and going, I don't even come close to that. I need Jesus. I need help.
Right.
So that's one. The second thing is there accountability in that person's life? And as people rise up that power ranking, they have to be disciplined to want the accountability. If you're not that powerful, accountability sort of arrives naturally. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
With your boss, with your spouse, with people around you. As you get more and more powerful, that accountability has to be self-initiated. And I would raise a red flag with anybody who doesn't have that accountability, because when you don't have that accountability, you don't really answer to anyone. What's to stop you? Who's to say? That's one of the challenges with people talking about this wonderful new world. And I don't want to get us off on a sidetrack of being in a relationship with AI. And I tell people the problem is my wife will tell me I'm being a giant jerk at times and be like, you need to cut that out. Where this AI chatbot will never tell me anything but what I want to hear. In a very real way, when somebody's powerful, they can choose to have yes people around them all the time. And that's any power. That's not relegated to CCM. That's in the church. That's in politics. That's in sports. That's in business. It's in education. But if you don't have anyone to tell you, I don't know that I would do that.
Right.
Then I think the recipe, not in the same way, maybe with the same level of darkness that some of this Tate stuff, at least the accusations seem to be.
Yeah.
But there's going to be some going off the rails, because I know humanity and we're sinful and we're going to go off the rails if we don't have accountability. So I would treat people with grace and know up front they're going to let you down. Don't idolize them. They're going to let you down. And then the second thing is I'd be very wary of people who don't seem to have accountability in their life.
And typically you can find those things out, correct? I mean, I remember hearing a band, I think it was Audio Adrenaline, that they had a pastor that kind of traveled with them kind of thing. I remember hearing that kind of through the grapevine and follow it real close. But I know that there were situations where people did those kinds of things. So, but my perception though is, because I both know that one of the newsboys from he was in the music scene that I was in once upon a time in our hometown. And I get the feeling they kind of started off that way, possibly. And did that change? Did it just kind of, you grow out of it because you've been doing this forever and ever and ever, or?
Yeah, I don't know that they didn't have a road pastor with them. Still, bands travel with a road pastor.
Right.
I believe, don't quote me on this, I know some of the members of this band, but I'm not sure if they still travel one, but I know they did. Casting Crowns did. Yep. Mercy Me holds themselves very accountable. But there could definitely be a scenario. One of the misconceptions about the road is there could be a scenario, and I'm not making any accusations. I'm just painting the picture for how the life is, non-specific to the newsboys, because I don't know about that, whether they have one or not. But there could be a scenario where you would have a road pastor on the tour with you and still be able to hide all kinds of stuff, because people have this
sounds like being just a church pastor.
You're all in a van together. And you know everything about each other's lives. And true, if you're traveling in a van or an RV or you have one bus, that's true. But I had the privilege of, we made it fairly big in Europe, never made it in the United States. And there were times I wouldn't see any of the other guys until sound check. I had no idea what their lives was. Now I can assume and hope that they would be living moral and perhaps in the accusations of Tate, legal lives, but I don't know that. And we had people, not road pastors, but we had tour managers who were there to keep people accountable and all. But you can't be everywhere all the time. So I don't know whether the newsboys had a road pastor or not. But I know that even if they did, there's ways to keep secrets. I mean,
I guess people that don't understand how life works in that, of course, everybody said there was something that went on YouTube where it was newsboys. They were standing at a concert they had done. They just got dropped from their label. They just got dropped from everything, Christian radio, the whole bit. And they were standing there and they kind of shared their part of things and what it was like for them. And they got a lot of bad comments. But on the other hand, everybody's kind of saying there's no way you didn't know. And there's sort of this, but is it at least, and again, I'm not asking you to be judge and jury here. I'm just saying, because I got a little bit of that from what you just said, is it at least possible to be relatively ignorant about what's going on as you're touring around?
Yeah, I will. I'm going to break this down in a few categories. So it's going to sound weird. I'm not copping out of the answer, but when you're a band at a low level, you would know. You would absolutely know. You're literally sleeping in 2 different hotel rooms, or 3 if you're lucky. Yeah. You're in a van. The guy's right there. You're going to know it's. But if you're traveling on 2 or 3 buses, if like I do know for the Newsboys that there were fly dates for some of them. The rest of the guys had families and would fly home on the off days. So people don't know that if you have an off day, the band sometimes will fly home. The crew will go on to the next city and set everything up, and then the band flies to that.
Right.
Some of these scenarios, at least reported, was that Tate stayed with the crew, and the rest of the guys went home. Totally plausible. I mean, that happens all the time. That happened on a European tour with me. I went on a mission trip with my family, and the guys flew in to the first gig, and I caught them on day 3. Right. They had no idea what I was doing 2 days earlier. I had no idea what they were doing 2 days. And then I went and caught back up with my family after the tour. You know, you're not always traveling together. That's one. That's a misconception. Not always traveling together. The second thing is you all have separate hotel rooms, and people have separate schedules. And so I always roomed with our keyboard player. I knew exactly he could not have got away with it. So, but the bass player who roomed with the production manager, I don't know what they did after we said goodnight and we had our. Now this is not nefarious, but after you leave the gig and you've promised yourself all day that you've already ate 3 meals and you're not going to eat another meal, you break that promise and you go eat another meal. Right. And after that meal, you go back to the hotel room. And once those doors shut, I have no idea what those guys do for the next 10 hours.
Yeah.
Now you can say, how do you hold each other accountable? Well, you can ask the questions, but I don't really know. I didn't lay eyes on it. Yeah. And so that's a scenario. So in one regard, if you're a low level band, the chances of that are lessened because your lives are too intertwined because of finances. Sure. You're having less hotel rooms, you're eating together. As you rise up that ladder, you're traveling more separate, you're leading more separate lives, you may be eating in different places. There's more people on the road. And just like summer camp, people silo into their favorites and all that sort of stuff. And to be honest with you, the bigger you get, the more likely you're going to have road crew who aren't Christians. You just are.
Yeah, like I thought of that. That just comes with the nature of the industry as it stands, right? Okay, so the best person to do this job happens to be. It's kind of like a church building calling a plumber in some sense. Is that
exactly? Okay. Are you always going to hire a Christian plumber?
Right.
Maybe not.
Yeah.
And so there's that level. Then there's the other thing where the likelihood of knowing. If the band was traveling like that, members flying in and out, traveling on separate buses, it is entirely plausible. I'm not saying that's fact. It's entirely plausible that the guys in the band had no idea.
Yeah.
It is less plausible that management had no idea what was going on, because as these things creep up and there's some legalities or stories that need to be squashed, it is highly unlikely that the tour manager didn't know stuff.
Right.
Because their literal job is putting fires out. I will admit, I was not always the most patient with 8 a.m. radio interviews after playing till 1 o'clock in the morning. And I was not always the most kind. I was not my best self always to radio station. And my tour manager had to sometimes smooth some things over and be like, hey, he's not really like that. He's really tired. He's going off 4 nights of 3 hours sleep. Please come to the show. He'll be in a much better. So even on a much less level, although sinful, that's literally the tour manager's job, is to put out fires. And so I think there's levels of plausibility. But the band members may have been some of the least likely to know what was happening.
Yeah. So, and I think one of the things that just kind of came out, this isn't a secret, this isn't because you're an insider, but I think people heard after the fact, some things got released. It kind of got leaked out. It started as one thing. Hey, I've got some skeletons in my closet. I'm going to go get help. oh, now that we investigate it, this has gotten a lot more severe, and there's victims, and it's a whole nother level. But I think it came out on the backside of that. Well, kind of everybody knew there was something, and he had a problem with alcohol, and that's where some of the disillusionment goes on. Well, how far back does this go? Was it when he was with DC Talk? I mean, and everybody in the know knew, in that sense, in a generic sense. And I think that's where disillusionment comes in a little bit, and it goes back to your culture of secrecy or whatever. I mean, is that a plausible thing, that there's at least rumors flying around that I don't know what to do with?
Yeah, that definitely is a thing. That is definitely not only plausible, but for a fact, there are rumors flying around about many different people in the industry. The issue with that is they're true about 50% of the time.
Okay.
And so you don't know whether they're true. And then even if you know they're true, knowing what to do with it, because if I knew a rumor about somebody to be true, at least in a general sense, my first response would be to go to them. It wouldn't be to go to the Roy's report. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Unless it's criminal. And I will say this about Tate, and these are presently accusations. He's not been convicted in court of law. And I never saw him assault anyone. I just want to be clear about that. But the rumors about Tate, there's been some misconstruing about the rumors. The rumors that people would hear over and over again was about him being same-sex attracted and abusing alcohol.
Right.
Never did I hear a rumor about him assaulting anybody. Okay. Never heard it from anyone, not once. And so when people have reported, those two things have been conflated together. And it seems like people in the CCM industry knew about these accusations of assault for 20 years and didn't say anything. To my knowledge, that's not true at all. No, that the first time most people I know in the industry heard about the assaults is when the Roy's report reported it. So you're conflating two secrets.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I would say the same about the cocaine abuse. I didn't know anyone openly who knew about that. And I never saw that. I never saw any cocaine use. So,
and that's something that obviously be easy to do in secret. And the nature of victims in these situations, which is so tragic, is they kind of go underground because, and they've talked to these people. I was embarrassed. I didn't know how to handle this. It goes back to the power thing. I'm in this situation. I didn't want to jeopardize my life. I didn't want to jeopardize my career. On and on and on it goes. And so you could see how it would just kind of go underground for years on end. It doesn't make it right by any stretch, obviously, but it does. The human psychology behind it is kind of it's kind of rough in that sense, and I hate it for people in those situations.
Say, if I can add this, that there are people who worked with Tate, even in the last few years, that I would bet quite a bit of money whose walks with the Lord are pretty solid, and they worked with him. That shows me that it wasn't as known as people think. It wasn't as, you know what I'm saying? It wasn't as open. Were there rumors? Absolutely, there were rumors. And I think the hard thing ethically, here's where it does get hard ethically, and I'm not sure I have the answer on this. If I heard that something horrible, like my friend Brett Nicholson was a Rush fan, and I heard that rumor.
You had to go there. You just had to go there, didn't you? My goodness. That's just.
And I heard that rumor once. I could blow it off as just not being true. But after I heard it 5 or 6 times and people said they borrowed the 2112 album from him, at what point do I start to go like, perhaps these rumors are true, even without evidence? Yeah. When does it tip over? And I don't know. I mean, rumor and conjecture are just that. But at the same time, same story after same story after same story starts to pile up. And I'll be honest, I don't have a good answer on when we should, is it 4 times you've heard it? Is it 8 times you've heard it? Is it does it depend on the credibility of the source? Man, that's tough. Yeah. When is the tipping point to believing the rumors?
Right.
I don't know.
Well, and even though that's a absolutely horrible illustration, I think we still get the point, because that's something that's bothered me, because I've seen in my own world, in the church world, in the nonprofit world, I have watched situations where people have gone off the rails and they've done some terrible things and all that, and we kind of live in a contradictory culture, because I'm coached all the time believe the best in people. I mean, when I look for the best in people. That's how I get along with people. I look for that giftedness. I look at this, that, and the other. And to your point a while ago, you probably need to throw in, yeah, remember they're sinners too. But when I get to know someone and work with them and with them day in and day out, and our families get together and they're just a friend and they act like everybody else and they laugh at the same jokes and we do listen to Rush and it's amazing and we all love it. When that happens, I build up a trust that it will take more than one rumor to break that down. Because my first instinct, and I think everybody's probably got friends like that, my first instinct would be the deniability thing. Well, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. We would never do that. Of course he wouldn't do that. I know him. But then, yeah, and then it starts going down. But I think sometimes we miss, and I don't know how to. I think there's probably training you can do in trying to spot things earlier. Maybe it's how to be a darker cynic class or something. But there is that we live in this contradictory space of I want to believe the best, I want to give grace, I want to give forgiveness, and then there you go, and you can get burned and you can slide into places where I should have said something and I didn't. Of course, and I've been in a situation where I asked somebody very directly and they said, well, no, that's not true. And you believe him. He was lying his face off. But I knew him for so long, I didn't interpret it as lying. Well, he'll tell me the truth. Of course he will. No, he wouldn't, because he was protecting a lot of that. That's an interesting place to be in. So,
well, and the other thing too, I think, is that, I mean, somebody could watch this video and have known me in high school or known me at one of my lesser moments, like, that guy's actually a jerk. Why is he talking about this? And in that moment that they met me, they would have been right. You know, some radio station guys.
I didn't want to go there, Jason. Yeah, that's right. I've known you a long time. You've grown.
Yeah, and here's the thing, though. But I'm not conflating that with criminal behavior.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that is that the double life thing, something much more nefarious going on underneath the surface. That's tragic and hard, and who knows how that makes its way in. And you do wonder about how that works.
Yeah, and I do want to address this part of it because a couple people, including Haley Williams, the pop star, has indicated that if Tate could have lived openly gay, that he wouldn't have had to go to such means to fulfill himself sexually. If that's true, and I until it's in court of law, I'm not saying whether it's true or not. I will say this: I think there's enough of a tipping point of accusers that it ought to be taken very seriously and to be investigated thoroughly and even criminally.
Absolutely.
But I'm not saying I wholeheartedly believe it, because innocent until proven guilty. However, I do think we should be taking this incredibly seriously, culturally and legally, if it crosses that line. But conflating being same-sex attracted and not living in a culture that's affirming of that with necessitating that you drug people against their will and assault them, I think is a horrible line to draw. And I don't think one necessitates the other at all. I think that is a pretty terrible line to draw.
Yeah. Well, hard to argue with that. Completely agree. And so I kind of want to end on a more positive note, because I am hoping that people will be helped. They're your fans. You've had your Larry Norman moment or your much newer artist moment. You had talked about, in your view, 70%, I think, are legit, real. Can you speak to that, just about what have you seen and how do you spot, beyond the accountability thing, how do you spot that what you interpret to be genuine and just, I don't know, maybe there's story or personality, you don't have to name names, but just people that you know that you're like, man, not only they're awesome, but they're even better than I thought. They have a higher level of class and righteousness and commitment than I even knew from their public image.
Yeah, I'll tell one story. It didn't involve me, but I heard it from, and I will use names because it's a positive story, a guy named Barry Grawl. He's the bald guitar player in Mercy Me. And he told the story that Casting Crowns' first tour, they were the opening act for Mercy Me. And at one of the shows, Bart, the singer for Mercy Me, got the 24-hour flu or food poisoning or something, and he was having digestive difficulties on the bus. He, I don't know if YouTube would block that. He the food came back up in a
I
very
don't know how they
violent
work that
way.
either.
So, and so that happened while Casting Crowns was performing. Casting Crowns then went off. Mercy Me came on. They were the headliner. And when they came off stage after the show, Bart went ahead with the show. Casting Crowns, not the crew, the band had cleaned the vomit in Mercy Me's bus for them. So they got back to the bus and Bart could be sick without having all that around. The rest of the guys in the band bleached it, the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's not anything that helped their career. It's not anything they had to do. It's just something they did because it was the right thing, and a pretty disgusting thing to do.
Yeah. You would think they'd be above
because
that.
It's the right thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. That's good. And so, and the 70% is, I would think, is relatively reliable in that sense, because you've been in this a while and been able, and got past sort of the starstruck stage, I would assume.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of normal culture things. Well, Jason, before we go, what I'd like you to do is you have published one book and you're working on publishing another one. Oh, it's published. I know the second one was out. Yeah.
No, well, I have two, and a third one's coming out in August.
Oh, okay. Well, I should have stayed better tuned with your life. I thought, okay. Oh, well, let's say what they are. And they don't have to do with CCM, I don't think, do they? They're kind of your other areas of interest, but I want people to hear about that.
Oh, sure. Yeah. The first one is Deconstructing a Disciple's Doubt.
Right.
And it's about how when people move from, it's a philosophical, can be used as a philosophy of religion textbook, but it mixes sort of culture and everything in. And it's really about when we moved away from a Christian worldview, particularly when young people do it when they've been raised in the church, they tend to not give the same scrutiny to the worldview they're moving toward as the one they're leaving.
Right.
Grass is always greener kind of thing. And it's sort of a challenge for that. The second book is Devotions, because that first book's pretty heavy philosophically, a lot of, $5 words and stuff. And I wrote a 30-day devotional, 42-day devotional on each one of the sort of many subjects within the original book. That's more easily digestible, has prayer in it, more reference to scripture, more theological. Right. And then the one that's coming out in August is What is a Person in the Age of AI? Right. Kind of going back to what are the necessary conditions to being a person? Because for all of humanity, it's been assumed to be synonymous with being a human. Well, now AI is challenging that. And so it's a book about what does it really mean to be a person, and can AI ever achieve it?
Yeah. Well, that I love the interest in that all by itself, because that's a super intriguing question. And I love the things you did. So is there anything that we should have talked about that we didn't, you could think that would, add on there at the end?
No, just like I would be remiss if I didn't emphasize the fact that everyone in the CCM industry, the 70%, the 15%, and the other 15% are sinners, and they're going to let you down. So the letting us down part, we got to get over a little bit. I would also love to see the ecosystem of secrecy kind of end. Right. That if someone says, hey, I don't think having a beer is wrong, and I'm going to be open about that, even if they lose some fans, I think that makes a much healthier system than hiding. If the accusations about Tate are true, they are in a completely different category. Yeah. This is criminal felony assault behavior. I will say this about Tate. I never saw that happen with my own eyes, but I think there's some credibility to the accusations. Yep. And I think that as this plays out, there's enough smoke there that we need to thoroughly investigate the fire. And I think there is a little bit, the disappointment we may feel with the criminal behavior being a different category is right and true. And we should be extra disappointed in that.
Right. Yeah. Well said. Thank you so much for your time, for your expertise and your experience and your honesty. Appreciate it, man. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
All right. We'll see you.